We have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Yomi Braester, who is coming all the way from the University of Washington, just down the street. Go Huskies. His research focuses on literary and visual practices with emphasis on modern China and Taiwan in architecture, advertisement, screen media, and stage arts. He is interested in how texts and images change our perception of space and history. The founding director of the UW Summer Program in Chinese Film History and Criticism at the Beijing Film Academy. He has served as the president of the Association for Chinese and Comparative Literature. He's also the recipient of the 2012 Joseph Levinson Book Prize in the post-1900 category, given by the China and Inner Asia Council of the Association for Asian Studies for his new book, Painting the City Red. Please welcome me and join me, Yomi, to the stage.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I really thank the Seattle Asian Art Museum and the Gardner Center for inviting me. Let's see. It's a pleasure to be speaking to a home audience. Now it's too much. Let's see. Is this good? All right. So I'd like to start with an artifact that never existed to the best of my knowledge. It's a rendering. This is not working. Let's see what's going on here. That was better, yeah. Okay. All right. So I'd like to start with an artifact that never existed to the best of my knowledge. It's a rendering of the 12th century painted scroll along the river at the Qingming Festival, made out of chocolate. As I said, it never existed. What we see here is a detail of the scroll carved in wood as part of a piece of furniture. Anecdotally, it was going to be exhibited in chocolate at the China Pavilion of at the 2010 World Expo in Shanghai. And I would be standing here today giving a talk about the chocolate afterlife of Chinese painting. There are practical and symbolic implications in the choice of medium for presenting aesthetic tradition. Along the River at Qingming Festival is probably the most famous painting in China. That's at least what Wikipedia says. The scroll acquired an iconic importance since it was first exhibited in public in 1953 as one of the major treasures of the Beijing Palace Museum. Now it appears everywhere, in hotels, on water bottles, in a promotion for a TV food program, on walls, in this case, the wall surrounding a large gentrification site at the center of Beijing, where it was used to promote the Beijing spirit. Eventually, the centerpiece of the Shanghai Expo, China Pavilion, was an animated version of Along the River at Qingming Festival titled River of Wisdom. The expo organizers hailed the animated scroll as a symbol of integrating Chinese tradition and modern technology. Having been viewed by about 70 million visitors during the Shanghai Expo and millions more during tours to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore, not to mention online views on YouTube and similar sites, River of Wisdom is likely the most popular piece of digital art in 21st century China. River of Wisdom joins many other artworks that bring traditional aesthetics up to date, not only by incorporating new media, but also by suggesting that the pristine nature featured in earlier paintings had been transformed, indeed violently destroyed. artists ask, what can China's aesthetic tradition contribute to our existence here and now? For that matter, what is tradition? How is it invented and constantly reinvented? What means do Chinese artists have at their disposal to render the remediation of century-old paintings relevant to contemporary life? The three artworks I've just briefly displayed on screen, River of Wisdom, The Clouds, and the new classic of Mountain and Seas, exemplify how traditional art is retooled to address current issues. I'd like to provide some context for understanding how artworks are reimagined and tradition reconfigured. These 6 concepts interacting with each other may help us in outlining the digital afterlife of Chinese painting: scale, immersion, foregrounding the medium, rethinking tradition, shanshui, and urban critique. Scale acquires a symbolic value. River of Wisdom takes the form of a huge mural projection, 120 meters long and 6 meters high, about 20 times longer than the original painted scroll. The logic behind this blown-up version seems to be the larger the better. Scale is often flaunted in China. The world record for the longest wood carving is held by the carving of along the river during the Qingming Festival. The China Art Museum, which hosts River of Wisdom, is a 63-meter-high building occupying an unimaginable 39 acres. More about huge exhibits in a minute. But let's remember that along the river during the Qingming Festival, that is the original 12th century scroll, is in itself an exercise in scale. It's over 5 meters long, not a small painting by any standards. Or maybe it's not such a long scroll, considering that it depicts an entire city. The Song Dynasty capital of Bianjing, in that sense, the Song Dynasty capital of Bianjing. In that sense, the painting is a miniaturization of nature. The way that Chinese gardens feature mountains and rivers within a small space. Even at 5 meters, the scroll requires getting really close to examine the details. It only makes sense that multiple versions exist that give the audience the opportunity to make out minutiae without going blind. The example right here is a digital, unanimated image exhibited in Hong Kong in 2019. It's based on a newly rendered copy of the scroll executed by 20 painters over 400 days. It's a restoration, an upsizing, and a digitization all at once in the name of giving new life to the old painting. Another way to play with scale can be seen in the modern city of Kaifeng, which is the location of Bianjing, the city depicted in the scroll. Here we have a literal example of scaling to size, as the Millennium City Park, or as it's called in Chinese, the Along the River during Qingming Festival Park, recreates choice portions of the scroll. At about the same time, a lot featuring landmarks from the scroll was opened at the Hengdian Film Studio. These theme parks show how pre-modern painting weaves its way into modern life, into cinematic fantasies, and even into the texture of the contemporary city. River of Wisdom inspired other animated works. The scroll, An Overview of Old Beijing, a painting that describes daily life in Beijing in the early 1930s, comprises 3 scrolls that measure a total of 220 meters. In 2011, The animated version of one of these three scrolls, Old Beijing Animated, was installed on the grounds of the former Olympic Village. The digitized scroll boasted being the longest screen in the world at 228 meters. It seems like various events and venues were caught up in an arms race for the most gargantuan blown-up version of traditional brush painting. Now, why does scale matter so much? And why do some of the most prominent examples use the format of the horizontal painted scroll? Here I'd like to introduce the concept of immersion. Immersion is often brought up as the holy grail of digital media. For example, in virtual reality, it's been the buzzword in art exhibitions, especially since the Van Gogh Immersive Experience franchise was launched in 2001. Such exhibitions have become increasingly popular in China as well, as in the recent exhibitions that takes Qi Baisher's very small album leaf paintings, blows them up, and animates them. There's definitely something gimmicky about these immersive experience shows. In fact, we don't need any advanced technology for being immersed in a fantasy world. Just think of what a good book can do. Google claims even more primitive technology suffices. Likewise, low-tech Chinese landscape paintings create a realm unto themselves. I can't explain this any better than Maxwell Hearn from the Metropolitan Art Museum, so let's listen to his description. Note how Hearn refers to entering the world of the painting. Note also how Hearn unfurls the scroll one arm length at a time to select a specific point of view.
Finally, we enter the world of the painting. The artist Fang Songyi has given us something to identify with here. We see the roofs of a temple hall on this peninsula in the foreground, and it's from this vantage point that we can enter into the painting. So we're given an anchorage here, and as we walk through these trees right down to the spit of land at the very end, we can focus on these beautiful grasses drawn with maybe a very fine-tipped brush. So our focus is really narrowed into the foreground. We look up, we see this vast expanse, and then something magical takes place. It is a kind of transformation, a transmutation of space that the artist has created, so that we leap in a matter of inches from these fine grasses across to trees that are already clearly a mile away from the foreground trees that we saw just a minute ago. That shift in scale makes this mountain enormously high. So we've gone from a contemplation of deep distance to a contemplation of height, of unimaginable towering height. And then this extraordinary Taoist painter reminds us of the impermanence of the universe, that even this substantial granitic cliff can be dissolved and return again into vaporous qi, or the breath of the universe. And the very last few inches of the scroll, we return to nothingness.
The immersive effect, as Hearn describes it, places us directly inside the landscape painting. Take this hand scroll, which is designed to make the viewer imagine herself within the virtual environment, taking a journey through the mountains, taking in the views from each pavilion along the way. Now, along the river during the Qingming Festival follows the same practice. The scroll starts with the bucolic landscape and a mule caravan about to cross a bridge. Our path leads us through the city's main thoroughfare and all the way out the city gate. As an aside, when cinema scholars tried to figure out how films construct a narrative path, they became interested in Chinese scrolls. Sergei Eisenstein wrote about them already in 1923. Gerald Noxon, one of the earliest so-called cinematologists, wrote in 1963 that the pictorial origins of cinema narrative lie in Chinese paintings, and referred especially, or specifically, to along the river during the Qingming Festival, since the river stitches together for him the images into a synthetic narrative. For Noxon, the painted scroll is a proto-cinematic narrative device designed to produce the illusion of movement. The painted scroll both presages and informs an immersive relation to the screen. In this sense, the scroll isn't film's past, it's film's future. Back to River of Wisdom. In principle, viewers of the animated scroll may enjoy a virtual tour of the old Song capital, similar to that provided in Along the River during the Qingming Festival. But River of Wisdom uses a few tricks that bring us to the 21st century. The key to understanding how River of Wisdom is different from a painted scroll is that it was designed with architectural concepts in mind. Architectural concepts and architectural tools. First and foremost, the work is located within a space designed specifically for it. The exhibition hall is a twisting corridor guiding the visitor between the scroll and zigzagging mirrors to occupy appropriate viewpoints. The wall on which the images are projected is not a standard gallery wall, but an undulating three-dimensional surface that further suggests a certain movement in space and particular viewing angles. The technology for displaying upon irregularly shaped surfaces, known as projection mapping, is widely used by architects. The animated River of Wisdom shows both day and nighttime views, following the conventions of architectural miniature models, which cater to prospective buyers by giving them a preview of what moving around the completed building would look like and feel like. It should come as no surprise that River of Wisdom was designed by an office specializing in architectural simulation, crystal computer graphics. The animated segments highlight buildings and show how human figures negotiate their way along and through them. River of Wisdom redefines what counts as the spectator's immersion. Like other hand scrolls, Along the River requires patient absorption, unrolling one section at a time, as we saw Maxwell Hearn do in that video produced by the New York Times. We can contemplate the natural scenery and the minutiae of daily life. But the conditions for viewing River of Wisdom are different. Couldn't be more different from the scholar handling a dainty scroll in his study. The visitors are often rushed past the digitized scroll. But another kind of experience emerges out of being part of a large crowd moving along the vast corridor and envelops the visitor. The viewer doesn't use the space, or doesn't really use the space. It's the space that accommodates the visitor. The museum space doesn't host the artwork, it is the artwork. This interaction between the visitor's body and the architectural space is further enhanced by the resonance between the large screen and the small screens in the visitor's hands. The visitors stop, whip out their smartphones, and take photos and videos of the gallery. They view the digitized scroll on their handheld devices in a 21st century version of the intermediate object of observation and absorption, akin to the draftsman's grid or a camera obscura. We're thinking now through a different paradigm, not painterly absorption, but architectural, photographic, and cinematic immersion. The scroll has become a screen, conceptually and literally. River of Wisdom is one example of many. Perhaps the most famous one is the one featured at the opening ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympics. This is a digital display, at the time the largest pliable LED screen in the world, 147 meters long and 22 meters wide, shaped as a painted scroll. The screen features famous Chinese paintings, including along the river during the Qingming Festival. The screen was designed by Crystal CG, which was subsequently commissioned to design River of Wisdom. We've come a full circle from scroll to screen to scroll. Artists, no matter if they work with brush and paper or with computer program and screens, are always aware of the medium they use and want to foreground that medium. If they work in both ink and animation, they'll make that amply clear. There's a sense of joy in tearing down the curtain, so to speak, and show the workings of the Wizard of Oz. The artist Xu Bing does this almost literally as he invites the audiences to see how he has remade famous paintings. In Background Story, a series of installations he started in 2004, he does this literally. Here are two examples. Xu's tribute to Dwelling in the Fuchun Mountains, which takes after a part of this famous, very famous 14th century hand scroll. And here is Xu Bing's tribute to the 14th century hand scroll, The Endless Xishan Mountains. These, however, are not paintings. They're installations inside light boxes. The visitors can go around the flat surface to see how images are cobbled out of sticks, dried glass rocks, plastic bags, and tape. Demystifying the medium is part of the experience. Xu Bing brings together traditional Chinese paintings and the interest of modern art in found objects. Xu Bing picks up the challenge of working with 21st century media, such as flotsam, industrial debris, and light projection. And as almost always in Xu Bing's exhibitions, there is a space where visitors can make their own art. We are not passive viewers. We are part of the art-making process. One more example of foregrounding the medium is The Beautiful Forest, which was nominated for Best Animated Short Film in the 2017 Academy Awards. The director, Yang Chun, has cited River of Wisdom as his source of inspiration, and like River of Wisdom, it partly animates earlier famous paintings, in this case 10 Song Dynasty paintings, including these works. The full animated film is almost 7 minutes long, so for the sake of time, I'll show just the beginning, shot from the middle, and the ending. here to the middle of the video. And then the ending sequence. Okay, the full video is available on YouTube. Like River of Wisdom, the beautiful forest, this video animates only specific elements while leaving others untouched. We can enjoy the juxtaposition between the brush and the digital medias and realize how they can complement each other. The highlighted area in the middle refers to the original painting, which is in the shape of a round fan. Or the round bright area may be understood in cinematic terms as a spotlight. Toward the end, a similar highlighted circle reappears, only this time it's a gun sight with crosshairs. This ending is purely cinematic, the gun smoke, the feathers fluttering down, but then instead of seeing the dead bird or the same scenery without the bird, we see the album leaf with a gaping hole in it, with burn marks on the edges. Again, we've come full circle from painting to screen and to painting again. And this time around, the subject matter of the album leaf no longer suggests harmonious nature, but shows how the environment is literally ripped apart. New media art suggests that tradition may be retooled technologically and to fit messages relevant to the present. Tradition has been a source of inspiration and anxiety, even a burden. Consider the plight of the Japanese film director Ozu Yasujiro when he was told, well, isn't a film just like a painted hand scroll? It's the same idea, right? And one of the people who came up with the idea that film is like a scroll is none other than the pioneering director Sergei Eisenstein. Ozu would have nothing of it. He stated, "The widescreen reminds me of a roll of toilet paper." So let's keep in mind that traditions are always invented and reinvented. Let's look at a different set of scroll-like paintings, which are not directly beholden to traditional paintings. These are exhibited at the Qin Lake National Wetland Park, a preservation just northwest of Shanghai. There are guided tours through the area and a visitors center that shows 4 90-second videos about the different seasons in the park. The reference to traditional painting is evident. The 9:35 ratio resonates with hand scrolls, as do the flora and fauna depicted in the videos. The color palette also echoes traditional brush paintings. The videos display classical poems in calligraphic font, similar to brush-written colophons, usually attached to the paintings. Yet in other ways, the images we see right here are very contemporary. The Four Seasons videos move as they would when captured by a film camera or generated by an editing software, which is what they were. The style shifts from fine brush painterly style to impressionistic ink washes to photographic. The movement is cinematic, including dissolves and pans that give the scroll-like image a modern look. Digital design is evident in the animated transitions and artificial flare effects. The videos at the Qin Lake Preservation were designed by the firm Yuko-Lab. Yuko-Lab, founded in 2006, set up offices in China as a subsidiary of the LA-based design firm Yuko, which provides graphics to leading Hollywood companies such as DreamWorks and Disney. The office has combined Yuko's cinematic know-how with state-of-the-art architectural presentation design. Yuko-Lab primarily promotes commercial real estate, integrating videos into innovative, indeed immersive, spatial designs. Yuko-Lab often uses elongated screens, such as this one, for custom-made videos. Here is Yuko-Lab's promotional video for the Jing'an Carry Center in Shanghai. And again, I'm just going to show snippets of it. This is the time to thank Yuko-Lab's team, which has been very generous with their time and materials. Now, this video doesn't directly pay tribute to traditional Chinese aesthetics, not to mention any specific painting, yet there are a couple of elements worth noting. Much like a scroll, the video presents segments that need to be integrated by the viewer by drawing imaginary paths. A sort of jigsaw puzzle or collage allows a panorama of the scenery from multiple viewpoints. The abstract lines that conclude the video could equally well outline Shanghai's cityscape or trace the progress through a horizontal scroll. To the extent that we may speak of a scroll, it's not the intimate hand scroll, but its contemporary avatar, a supersized screen housed in a tailor-made space requiring the visitor's bodily immersion. Works such as Yuko-Lab's video for the Jing'an Carry reduce traditional paintings to abstract forms. The ease of abstraction may owe to the double function of landscape in traditional Chinese painting. On the one hand, landscape paintings are a representation of land formations, sometimes depicting a specific location. On the other hand, landscape paintings become an occasion for experimenting with the brush, akin to what we're used to in Western painting since Cézanne. For this reason, we often refer to such Chinese paintings as shanshui, literally mountains and waters, or just landscape. But just as much, shanshui refers to an idea, what we may call the landscape aesthetic. Contemporary artists have experimented with distilling shanshui through new media. Feng Mengbo, one of the pioneers of digital art, I would say not just in China, but in the world, has created since 1995 multiple series exploring the concept of shanshui. In 2007, he produced the series Wrong Coding, Shanshui. Feng started with paintings by 4 17th century painters known as the Four Wangs. The Four Wangs are often dismissed by art historians as copyists, but for Feng Mengbo, their contribution lies precisely in the systematic methodology which he identifies as a rather contemporary approach, that is a 21st century approach, to decoding and encoding shanshui. Feng says, "I'd like to use a reductive method. Chinese painting uses meticulous brushwork. Once we extract this element, we'd be astonished to find out what remains." He uses Bryce 3D, a modeling, rendering, and animation program specializing in fractal landscapes. Feng modeled and mapped landscape elements until they looked Chinese to him. Whereas the Four Wangs copied and adapted earlier paintings, Feng used the Four Wangs as underlying textures and generated what he calls computerized shanshui painting. Feng Mengbo speaks explicitly of reducing the elements of traditional painting and literally does so by allowing into the work only what can be generated by algorithms. These days, the idea of leaving everything to artificial intelligence or AI is all the rage. We see it in various works, for example, by Evan Zhou, which generates shanshui paintings with the aid of AI. Another example is Liu Jiayu. For the 2022 Venice Biennale, she presented the installation Streaming Stillness. The title, Streaming Stillness, takes after a line from the Tao Te Ching, "Extend your emptiness as far as you can and to preserve your stillness." Juxtaposed with the classical reference is the use of computerized modeling of the kind that we've already seen used for architectural immersion. Liu also cites as one of her sources of inspiration tracks of Yugong, the 12th century gridded map of China, indeed a marvel of early geographic imaging. Liu describes her artwork. "The blank space left by civilization and heritage is filled out by floating, moving, AI-generated images." She also says the historical space made of red brick is transformed into an immersive poetic realm. Liu's recent work shows that there are still a myriad ways for integrating shanshui and AI, tradition and digital technology. Streaming Stillness is very satisfying to watch, as it is, in my opinion at least, but it can be appreciated even more through connoisseurship of traditional painting and with an eye to an emerging tradition of new media art. As important as the allusion to shanshui is the reference using new media to modern subject matter. Going back to River of Wisdom, the choice of along the river during the Qingming Festival for the China Pavilion was motivated specifically by the fact that this scroll is a paragon of using traditional painting to depict everyday urban life in the bustling capital, Bianjing, with detailed portrayal of various activities carried out by 814 human figures. Along the river at Qingming Festival let me go back for a sec, is a record of a prosperous cosmopolitan metropolis. Featuring this scroll as the centerpiece of the China Pavilion corresponded with the theme of the 2010 Shanghai Expo. Brandishing the motto, Better City, Better Life, the Expo set out to promote China as a global leader in a sustainable form of urbanization. Along the river during the Qingming Festival became a symbol of urban modernization and lent its name to other images, such as this photo collage exhibited at the Shenzhen Urban Planning Exhibition Hall, a showcase for the city's modern design. There is, of course, a large amount of wishful thinking, supported by government propaganda, in envisioning a benign, high-tech urbanism. And artists were quick to point it out. Along the river during the Qingming Festival became a code name also for images of contemporary urban life, not an idealized glitzy existence, but the life encountered by most city dwellers. Many works in this genre are photomontages. For example, Honghao's Along the River during the Qingming Festival, a series produced in 2000, progresses through modern-day Beijing. In some versions, the contemporary images are directly juxtaposed with the 12th century scroll. Other versions look more like a scroll in their own right with calligraphic colophons. Part of the fun is matching the features in the early scroll with the modern version. Here we have a preamble in nature, moving through commercial streets, crossing a bridge, viewing a major gate, and concluding in the suburbs. Insofar as Honghao's Along the River may still suggest the city as a desirable space, modern yet preserving the spirit of pre-modern cities, other renditions of the scroll are less generous. Perhaps the most famous is Dai Xiang's A New Along the River during the Qingming Festival. The scroll, assembled from more than 1,000 staged photos, spoofs current notorious events. In this segment, we see a road accident referring to a few incidents at the time in which relatives of party officials flaunted their immunity. We also see a strange-looking woman seated on the ground, like a number of women who appeared in public spaces and claimed to be time travelers from the past. Such variations on the famous 12th century scroll evoke an uncanny familiarity and at the same time a dislocation that Chinese viewers are likely to recognize as a criticism of modern urbanism. These and other adaptations of Along the River join other riffs on traditional scrolls that expose the less bucolic part of the contemporary environment. The digital afterlife of Chinese painting involves an exploration of how shanshui may be enhanced by screens and projections, immersive architecture, and other innovative technology. Sometimes no more than that, but new media can also serve as a point of departure for criticism, showing that nature is no longer pristine, that our environment is in bad shape. Recomposing shanshui may be just the way to emphasize the destruction we humans inflict. Now, I began with this amazing video piece, New Classic of Mountains and Seas, which deserves a talk on its own. This video, consisting of animated ink paintings, may remind us of our responsibility to the environment celebrated in traditional painting, and of what awaits us if we embrace technology without heeding its potential side effects. Okay, I'll end here. Thank you for your attention. Okay, I'll gladly hear what you all have to say. Maybe there's a way. Great. Yeah, I would love to see the audience. Yeah, please.
Oh, hold on. Can we bring you the mic so you can record?
Thank you for your talk, Yomi. I'm wondering if there is a connection between, well, there is a connection between River of Wisdom and the Chinese Scroll, but I'm wondering if there's a further connection between River of Wisdom, the Chinese Scroll, and panorama halls, maybe in 18th century, 19th century, early 20th century Western societies as a form of, entertainment, where there's all of these cylinder-shaped halls, and there's also a very long painting that would be moved inch by inch in front of, I guess, a seated or a standing audience. I'm not sure exactly, but I'm wondering if there is a connection between that in terms of, a media archaeologist's approach.
Right. I think thanks for your question. I've actually written about that because I do find it really interesting to think about what panorama as both as a technology of display and a concept can do for our understanding of things like this. And the answer, as I see it, is that there is a connection and there isn't a connection. And then there is a connection that's perhaps less self-evident. Let's start with what connection probably is not there. And that is, for those of you who may not know what the panorama is, it was a very popular form of entertainment, especially in 19th century Paris, where we would have halls. You can see a really good example of that. It's right near Philadelphia, right? I've been there, and I'm blanking on where exactly it is. It's in the suburb of Philadelphia, if I remember correctly. There are a number of those, and they are usually about, well, I can't say usually, but often they're about battle scenes. They are expansive. They are very immersive. You become very small as a visitor in that space. And in fact, there are such panoramas in China that were built mostly in the early 80s as part of I hope I'm correct in saying it's the early 80s. In any case, these are part of a propagandistic effort to commemorate big battle scenes, and they are built on those on the sites of those battles. And they look very different from this. And so we can see how the tradition of the panorama continues also in China. And again, the idea of having things large and larger and yet larger is very much part of the way that officials think about the aesthetics of propaganda. So we do have those in China, but I don't see the direct connection. In fact, I see some salient differences. But then there are these images that reinvent the panorama, right? And as I showed, there are a number of these. This is just one example. And indeed, they do take the architectural part of the panorama, I think, through that intermediary stage of going through architecture design, which is commercial design, which is a bit different. But then, as I said, there's also an unexpected connection in that the idea of the panorama has been reconfigured in contemporary China. For example, in the huge glass bridges or glass bottom bridges, where the idea is that we can both see the landscape, but also see the landscape mediated through some kind of architectural form, right? This is not a full answer, and I would have to go back to my notes to remember exactly when things were done. But thanks for your question, because I think that what it points to is the fact that there is a media archaeological element. That is, we do have to think also about how this material, something like this, has material roots elsewhere, and also in terms of the concept, that is the discourse of panorama, and how it plays out in, well, everywhere in the world, but specifically the way it works out in contemporary China.
Thank you for your talk. That was really dazzling. The sort of 6 elements that you listed, you know, these were fascinating. I'm wondering if some of these might have antecedents in a kind of pre-modern period in China. And the one I'm thinking about is scale. And this brings to mind Bob Harris' study of large-scale calligraphies on the landscape. And here is an example of scale, you know, different from the practice of calligraphy, that has a kind of immersive effect even in that earlier period. So are there sort of antecedents for some of these practices that may go back before this sort of 20th, 21st century development?
Again, a fantastic question, and I have to think more about it, but I have started thinking about it because indeed the question is, what does it mean to, let's call it, tame nature? And I think that there is an element of taming nature involved here, right? Whether it's just walking through nature, but then nature has also also needs to be somehow given to us as a painter, in a painterly form, simply by saying, okay, here's the pavilion, look in this direction, and there is a plaque saying, you know, this is what the view is called, and thereby also this is what you should be looking at, right? So, and the mirror image of that is the Chinese garden, which I mentioned, right? Is a miniature, miniaturizing nature. And so what you're referring to specifically, the large, shall we call it, I don't even want to call it necessarily calligraphy artworks, which of course they are, but this, I think that what these calligraphic works also do is rethink the scale of nature itself. So let's think for a second that these, huge rock-size calligraphies are actually as small as something that you would see on a scroll, and then the rest of the landscape is the scroll, right? So yeah, the simple answer is yes, it definitely, the idea of scale goes back, and it goes back in many other ways. Lothar Lederose has a fantastic book thinking about miniaturizing and faking various textures and forms that you would encounter in one art form in China, and then it's moved on to another one. So the idea of playing with media and as a way of also playing with scale is definitely not new, which is also why I wanted to say, think of a book, think of cave paintings, right? I don't want us to think that it's all new. The question is, what is new nevertheless? What are the artists trying to say is contemporary? And it's tricky, as you're pointing out.
I was wondering if you're seeing these same trends in art that's not necessarily sponsored by the Chinese government or for a big event like the Olympics versus more independent or underground artists taking, who are taking a similar type of approach to these ancient or more old artworks.
Yeah, I should have said it, I guess, explicitly, but I was trying to point out those connections in my talk. That is, perhaps I put this specific image too many times on the screen. I was trying to anchor our conceptualization in this image. But first of all, this image itself is a hybrid, if we want to think in terms of grassroots versus and commercial and government sponsored. I showed a number of government sponsored pieces. I could have shown more if I brought in those panoramas. But it was also important for me to bring out Lab, for example, which is mostly just purely commercial, although there are interesting ways in which it has been politicized, but that's not where it started. And there are many independent artists. I wouldn't necessarily call them underground. There's a big discussion on what underground art might mean. And there are, of course, examples where art is immediately banned and then you can call it underground. But examples such as this, this is definitely, let's call it the grassroots. Same here, and this one is not underground, but it definitely did not make the authorities happy. So we can see the gamut of just about everything, right? And it would be, I think, misleading to think in terms of just, first of all, to think that everything is government sponsored, or by the way that the government is always out to get you and plant nefarious ideas in your mind. But also that, artists work in a very pliant environment, or an environment that they manage to apply to their needs in many cases.
Hello, Professor Yumi. Thank you so much for your talk. Very inspiring. And since the topics around digital, want to raise, we all know there's a lot of digital tools nowadays that greatly impact the creation and recreation process of the artwork. For example, painting as well as, say, architectural design. And since I'm from architectural industry, I'm going to potentially raise some examples. We can use Midjourney to create a design or plans or drawing or rendering by pure text or prompts. And we can feed the algorithm with a still image, and it can just create a short animation for a couple of good seconds. Just wondering, from your perspective, if they actually present any opportunities or even threats in terms of design production. Another example would be a group of architects that actually try to certify their designs to be, say, this is done by human instead of an AI tool. So it's quite an open-ended question, but just trying to see what your thoughts on that. Thank you.
So thanks for your question. This is what I think everybody is trying to figure out right now. Artists, but also scholars, right? What does AI mean nowadays? And I gave a couple of examples here of AI-generated work. And I am, well, first of all, I'm not sure where it's going. Nobody's sure where it's going, right? Is it a threat or a challenge in a good sense? Both, as any new medium, right? And what I'd like to point out, rather than try to suggest where this might be going, because I will be proven wrong necessarily tomorrow, is think about what art, what tradition, what all these words that we're using may mean now that AI is here. That is the same question that was asked many times before. What is painting after photography? Is painting dead? Well, no, but at the same time, it's a different medium simply by the fact that photography also exists alongside it. Same thing with cinema once it came in, with TV, with various other forms, and now with AI. So, in other words, anything that we say now, even about works that we know that have been around for years or centuries, will have to take a new meaning. And again, I'm not sure exactly where it's going, but they're going to take a new meaning because they exist alongside AI and AI-generated art.
Well, again, we just want to thank Professor Yomi Braester for coming and for enlightening us with this incredible interdisciplinary lecture. And he'll be, I'm sure, happy to talk with some folks if you have any questions that you want to ask in front of the audience. But thank you so much for attending our second Cider University of this year, and we hope to see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.